Okay, good morning and welcome to The Real Me, Chapter 11. We're starting a new section in this book. Um, is it a new section? It's not a new section. It's something a little different. So, Exactitude in Halacha and Yerushalayim. That's the title of this chapter. It's a very important topic to discuss because, as he explains in this chapter, a lot of people, when they keep halacha and they're very stringent in halacha, they make sure to be very exact in keeping every single halacha perfectly. It creates a lot of depression and despair. And he doesn't even say this, but obviously I think that's what he means, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. You see a lot of people who have to see psychiatrists and psychologists because they're too exact in halacha. And a lot of halachas, if you follow it l'chumra, it has to be extremely precise. And no human being, like Gemara says, lo nina Torah l'malachi asharis, he mentions in this chapter, you can't be so perfect, you can't be so exact. A few examples he mentions: putting on tefillin correctly. According to Allah, it's supposed to be exactly between your eyes. People are always looking in the mirror, feeling with their head. Did it move? It makes you crazy. Having kavanah, he says in Kriya Shema, maybe Poseach HaSadecha and Ashrei, you're supposed to have kavanah for the Pirish Hamilim. I would add also Shemon Esrei, the first bracha. People make themselves obsessive and compulsive with it. I remember I had a problem once, meaning I was very stringent and exact in halacha, and I definitely had problems with Kriya Shema, but not the point that I've seen other people have much worse problems. I see people after davening sitting there literally for half an hour saying Kriya Shema, repeating Kriya Shema themselves. I may say like one or two times. It was very difficult for me saying Kriya Shema. And tefillah also, but he had a lot of time to say tefillah, and no one's there. There's no pressure. You don't have to move so quickly. 10 minutes Shemon Esrei in some yeshivas, so it's not so hard. But when I was shliach tzibur, right? You're shliach tzibur, and you're supposed to be motzi everybody, and you're davening, or at least be yotzei the tefillah of the shas, the shliach tzibur, to have pirush hamilim in the first bracha while you're saying it in public. You have to do it very quickly. Of course, I bowed to peer pressure. I just went very quickly, and obviously I didn't have in mind the Pirush Hamilim. I mean, if a lot of these things, like if you want to think about the meaning of the words, if I just wouldn't have had, some people think you have to replay in your mind the meaning of the words. I mean, Akel Gadol Gibra Anora, you know what those words mean. So you don't really have to think about it too much, but when you think about it, you're told to think about it, then your mind does the opposite. And the third thing he mentions is people are very careful with going to the bathroom. There's halachas. The Gemara mentions that you're supposed to not daven when you have to relieve yourself. And also there's an issue about the shaksu, right? There's an issue in the Torah. The Gemara says in Makos, you have to go to the bathroom and you don't relieve yourself. You're over an issue in the Torah. People think they always have to go to the bathroom. They're running to the bathroom every second. You feel even an urge, like my Rebbe said. He said when you have to even feel an urge to go to the bathroom for urine, right? To urinate. And that, your mind really can play tricks on you, and you can, have that phantom feeling you have to go to the bathroom. It make you crazy, because the halacha, really, the Mishnah Berurah extends this even saying any divrei Torah, just learning and things like that, learning or saying a bracha, when you have an urge to go to the bathroom, it's better to go to the bathroom. Even the Gemara only says regarding tefillah, Shemona Esrei, but people think that, and a lot of these halachas are based on, can you hold it in for 72 minutes? People are going to be machmer. Of course not, I can't hold it in for 72 minutes. Even though for sure, if you're on a road trip, you can hold it in for 5 hours. But it doesn't make a difference. People are very machmer with these things. A lot of other problem I've come across is Netilas Yadayim. People, I didn't have this problem with Netilas Yadayim, but people are very careful about Netilas Yadayim to make sure their whole hand gets immersed in the water and that their hands are really dry before they wash their hands, because according to the Chazon Ish, maybe it's a suffix. Maybe if your hands are wet when you wash them, so then it's the puzzle until it's a die, and people will wash their hands. He does that in the morning. People wash their hands 4 times. So Chazon Ish says 4 times to wash your hands. So I remember a guy in yeshiva used to bring 2 bowls, right? You think 1 bowl is a nice big chumrah to bring that bowl next to your bed with the water. He brought, anyway, I don't think it was 2 bowls. He brought 1 bowl, but he had 2 washing cups full of water. One coming, hanging on each side of this. The bowl of water until it's a dime. That was a little extreme for me. He would wash so much water on his hand. I mean, how much? Listen, I'll tell you the truth. I had this problem. I don't have this problem anymore, And I'll explain to you why I don't have this problem anymore. I never was diagnosed as OCD. Um, I know many people probably have been diagnosed as OCD based on halacha. Um, what's the eitzah? This is the chapter that deals with how do you figure out how do you get around this problem? With such exactitude on halacha, everyone knows a serious ben Torah. He wants to keep halacha. Limud nas lasos. You want to keep the Torah. How do you get around this? Right? There's so many halachas, being exact. The answer, he says, is that we have to strive not for yiras ha'onesh, but for yiras haromimus. The Svarim talk about the simple yira, the simple fear of Hashem, yiras shamayim, that you're afraid to do an aveira because you might get punished, or to not follow halacha because you might get punished by Hashem. And Masilas Sharm says even that's actually what's recommended for women and children. They can't get higher than that. But for men, the highest level of yiras haromimus, where you don't fear getting punished, you fear the awe. You have awe of Hashem. That's the way they translate it in Shar Yashuv. The word yira is awe of Hashem. Awe is just wonder. You're amazed by Hashem. Not yira doesn't mean fear. It means awe of Hashem, or at least to the point that you're in awe of someone who has the capability of punishing you. That's, I think, the Shari Tshuva says that's the correct definition. Is that it doesn't mean to mitigate. You have to go through yiras ha'onesh to get the yiras haromimus, but it changes. And when you get the yiras haromimus, you're not afraid of the punishment. You're afraid of the one who punishes. You're afraid of Hashem, who has the ability to punish, and it gives you a yiras haromimus. You feel that Hashem is so exalted and so mighty, He has the ability to punish you, but you're not thinking about the fact that He can actually punish you. It's sort of like diverts your attention from the fact that He can punish you to the fact that He's so great that He can punish me. At the end of the day, really, He can punish you, so you'll be afraid of the punishment. I don't know how it really helps, this idea. You're still thinking about the fact that He has the ability to punish you, which means that He will punish you, which means you better do the halacha right, and if you don't do it right, you can get punished. So, at the end of the day, it doesn't really help you, I think, this idea that he's saying. What would be my advice to deal with this problem? I think it's a systemic problem in yeshivas. I think it's a systemic problem in yeshivas, and to a broader extent in Klal Yisrael, the frummer people, frumkeit, meaning I really feel that a lot of Klal Yisrael, especially Hasidim, and it's becoming more prevalent in the Litvish world, and I think it really, centers around, you can see this very prominently when it comes to what music people are allowed to listen to, or not allowed to listen to. We're talking about Jewish music over here. There's a strong divide, in the Litvish world. There's a strong divide. Are songs of Mordechai Shapiro allowed? Benny Friedman allowed? Yaakov Shweki, are they allowed at chasanas? They're not allowed at chasanas. You can't play them at chasanas. There's more of a tilt of the Litvish world to go to the Hasidic music, because that's considered something which moves the upper half of your body, not the lower half of your body, if you're going to dance to the music. So then, like Mordechai Shapiro, you'll dance, or electric dance. It's going to ruin you. It's going to ruin your Yiddishkeit. It's not from, it's not Jewish. We want to be different. That's what Judaism is basically. The Haredi Judaism and Hasidic Judaism is throwing at you. Hasidim are the ones who started this. You got to be different. Not just different in that you keep the Torah and the Halacha. Is that your whole life has to be different. You have to dress differently. You have to do different things. Everything has to be different in your life. You Bedavka don't want to be, and they say lo seilechu, as in the Torah, you shouldn't follow the ways of the goyim. So everything, your education has to be different. Your what activities you do have to be different. Everything has to be called Jewish. The way you have your Shabbos meal has to be different. Do it. It has to be different. The foods you eat have to be different. Everything has to be different. It's called goyish, to listen to goyish Jewish music, right? Pop, the genre of music, or Nissan Black for sure. It's not good enough that, like A.B. Rodenberg says, that you're doing it to bring you closer to Hashem. The word lyrics bring you closer to Hashem. No, it has to be the beat, and the tune also brings you closer to Hashem. The dveikus to Hashem. We want to be. I'm definitely not me, but a lot of Haredi people want to be different in every regard of life. Everything has to be from, everything has to be Jewish, and it filters down into a halacha in the fact that when we're talking about halacha and Torah, let's talk about lulav and things like that, it becomes like the from becomes like excited because I'm doing something different, I'm doing something more. Chumras take on a new level. it's not just that you're machmir because you're not sure if you're being yotze the mitzvah. You're being machmir because I want to be different, and people are looking for isurim. They're looking to be machmir, and they're treating chumras like isurim, and it blurs the line. I think this is a serious problem with Baal Tosef. Why the Torah says Baal Tosef, it becomes like lavlov for your hadassah, aravos, let's say, in your dal minim. There's so many things that have become blurred, like putting a picture of a woman who's dressed musically in a magazine or in a video, usser. Why? Where does it say that? These things, again with music and things like that, or going to a baseball game or something like that. Like these things are become usser. It's not just like, oh, like we don't need to do it. It's like B'tul Torah. No, it becomes usser. It becomes a goy if you talk about politics. If you talk about Mishpacha magazine allows you politics. I don't know why some rabbis allow you politics is okay, even though politics have no effect on your life, just like sports has no effect on your life, presumably. Sports is not okay. Mordechai Shvira is not okay. Certain education is not okay. Going to college is not okay. There's so many things. You run down the list. It's just not. It's become blurred that it becomes actually usher now. And when you have that mindset, and now you're thinking on chumras, and first of all, you look for the chumras because it makes you different than everybody else. Everyone wants to be special and different. You're different than those modern Orthodox Dati Leumi people, or those Kardal people who don't have these chumras. No, we have these special chumras. The Briskers, the Briskers take on all these crazy chumras. I mean, really crazy things. It makes it part of their life. Anti-Zionist, anything to do with the state. They won't vote in the elections over here. Zionism. You take on these things and you become usher. It's a big problem, and people who go to yeshivas and they're growing up in these yeshivas, they grow up in these families. It's unfortunate, but they become too. Everything becomes usher. So when you're in Suffolk, you're not sure if you're doing the right thing. You just usher, because it's like part of life. But a real human being knows that it really ruins your life when you forbid things on yourself. It makes things, like the Torah says, 613 mitzvahs is not enough. You have to add more things. You have to Mosif more things. That's the sin of Adam and Chava, right? Baal Tosef. Chava said you can't even touch the tree. We do that with so many things, unfortunately. We're Mosif on the Torah, and it blurs the line and makes life so difficult. And I think it causes one of the reasons is that it's a systemic problem in yeshivas and all of Klal Yisrael. We're looking for chumras. We're looking to be different, and therefore you assume if you're not b'safek, you have to be machmir all of a sudden. And that, I think, is the biggest problem, why so many people suffer from this. And you have to, when I was becoming more frum and more charedi, I wasn't necessarily focused on, I was caught up in being different and you grab onto every chumrah. You talk about this at meals, you talk about your friends, what new chumrah I can find. No one's talking about the coolest that you could find. No one's talking about those things. The chumras, everyone's so excited about, but eventually, it might be exciting in the beginning, but eventually it causes depression and OCD. I think that's the bigger thing. We have to change the ideology of people, and I think just practically, if you don't know a halacha, right? I think there's an obligation upon every Jew to study Mishnah Berurah, to study the halachas that are pertinent to them, and you have an obligation to go through them. But it doesn't mean you have an obligation to go through them in 1 minute. You have an obligation to go at a reasonable pace. Join my shir Shulchan Aruch Yomi. I think that's a reasonable pace to finish all of Shulchan Aruch in 6.5 years. I think that's a reasonable pace, and something that you haven't encountered yet. You're a young Jew becoming more frum, or you encounter Hilchos Shabbos, you haven't even learned Hilchos Shabbos yet. If it's derabana, savik derabana the cool, you don't have to ask a rabbi. Even if it's doraisa, it's savik doraisa, and you haven't learned the halachas yet. I think the Torah wants you to make your own judgment. You don't have to run to a rav for every shaila. When you do have to run for a rav, is when you've learned the halachas and you're not sure about the psak halacha. You should ask a rabbi. And sometimes when the shaila comes up and there's no rabbi available, you don't have to make yourself crazy running after a rabbi. The Torah wants you to decide based on yourself. The Torah wants you to think and make decisions about yourself. That's the whole point of the Torah. The Torah gave you bechira chavshus to make decisions about yourself. If a rabbi is available, readily available, it's easy to ask a rabbi. And you learn the halachas, ask a rabbi. If someone's just telling you chumras, you have a question on Hilchos Shabbos, you've never learned Hilchos Shabbos, someone says, yeah, it's usher. Like I remember, I just got contact lenses a couple months ago, like 6 months ago, and I heard someone, when my brother-in-law was telling me, he says, it's a problem, you have to get special solution for your contact lenses for Shabbos, kosher Shabbos. Many years ago, I'd be calling a rav, asking him. Look, what the heck are you talking about? Contact lenses? Special solution? I mean, what is there? You're just looking for Yisurim. You're looking to make your life harder. And when all of Klal Yisrael looks to make your life harder, and I think a large part of the effect is that it's just the society of people studying Torah full time. When you go into the world and you deal with non-Jews and you deal with business, you're going to realize you're going to have to be making a lot of things. And this problem is really more prevalent with people who are Bachrim, because after you get married, you realize also you have to be lenient in a lot more things. Some people actually search for leniencies because it's not practical to be machmir when it involves your wife, the happiness of your wife, the happiness of your children. People will forgo their own happiness. When it comes to ruining their shalom bayis and ruining the happiness of their kids, they're going to be more careful to look for the kulas. So I think the idea to correct all of this problem, this chapter, it's not something that, and the last point I want to make about this is that the psak halacha that we're getting, even in the Mishnah Berurah, that's why the Shulchan Aruch Yom Yishir I give is so important, is to show that the chumras are completely wrong and off base, and we shouldn't assume because one thing is asur, so therefore automatically something else is asur. Like for example, putting on tefillin correctly, people are they just good the examples you give to make sure it's exactly between your eyes. Who says it has to be exactly between your eyes? Even if it's a little off, who says that's not a problem? Having kavanah and kriya shema. I explained. We talked about hilchos kriya shema, having kavanah in the first pasuk of kriya shema. I proved to you from the Gemara, Shulchan Aruch, you don't have to have kavanah for the pirush hamilim, and even we'll see in tefillah maybe you don't have to have pirush hamilim. So the way Shulchan Aruch, I'm not blaming Rav of Cairo. I think he wrote what was mistaber to him, but I think there's a lot of makom and with proper understanding of the Shulchan Aruch to see that it's not so, the chumras are not so broad ranging. You don't have to be machmir in all these cases. And again, relieving one's bowels. The Gemara only talks about tefillah. It doesn't talk about saying brachos. It's that saying kriya shema. And again, if it's suffix, this is derabanan for sure, right? To say just the daven with when you have to go to the bathroom. It's derabanan. It's not with derabanan l'kula. If we knew the halacha is better, and we were taught the halacha is better, and I think the rabbis have to be taken into account a little bit. They have to start looking for the kulas. We have to search, not to find a reason to aser, if we're besafik aser, to find a reason to be matir, because after all, the Gemara says koach de'etera adif. A real rabbi is the rabbi that's able to make it. That's why Moshe Feinstein was known throughout the Jewish world. It's such a great posik because he was able to find those kulas. Thank you, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, for chalav stam, chalav akum. I rely on that to eat my Reese's peanut butter cups. I love them. And listen, of course he says, Yerush Shamayim should be makir. Listen, I don't have Yerush. I'm not Yerush Shamayim. Who cares? I enjoy the peanut butter cups. Let me enjoy life a little bit. Those rabbis, the big rabbis, the ones able to come with the kulas, and I think it's incumbent upon a rabbi, if you have the position of a rabbi, not to be so quick to machmer. You have to look for those kulas. A real rabbi is able to be makel as much as possible. And it's a systemic problem, this problem. You can't blame it on the kid who's a 22-year-old kid in yeshiva, and he grows up and he's hearing all these chumras and he's making him crazy. Because I remember I was crazy. I remember there was an incident I was learning halacha, I became more from, and I felt like I have to follow all the halachas. I remember there was one time it was Sukkot, and we had, what was it? Those fake grass you have on our porch in the backyard, and it rained there. So, I didn't know what to do because we were reading the sukkah. The sukkah was built on the porch and it rained. So I didn't know if it was schita to step on the grass, like on Shabbos. I remember the whole Yom Tov, I was in Mishnah Berurah trying to find halacha. I couldn't find the answer to the question. There was no Rabbi Ribbi yet. I don't know if Rabbi Ribbi is going to help you with this. I couldn't find the answer to this question, and I literally, the whole afternoon, I was looking to find halacha. I was tiptoeing. Every time I had to go to the sukkah, I was tiptoeing. I wasn't sure. I was making myself crazy. That was just one incident that stands out in my mind, but I took halacha really seriously. And you should take halacha really seriously, but you should also know that most things you can be makel on. Most things are not usher. Unless it's usher, you're innocent until proven guilty when it comes to halacha. So don't think the opposite. You're guilty until proven innocent. You're innocent until proven guilty when it comes to halacha. So if you have no prior reason to usher yourself, don't usher yourself. Make a decision yourself. Right? You're allowed to make decisions yourself. You don't have to run to a rav for everything. If it's accessible, you can, but remember, you can make a decision yourself. Go lakula, Have a good life. Be well.